Welcome to the debut episode of Author Pep Talk. I'm so excited to introduce my first guest. This is Shannon Anderson. She's a TEDx speaker, a certified brain coach, and an award-winning children's book author. She has spent over 26 years inspiring young minds in the elementary school classroom and on college campuses. The Top 10 Teachers is one of the awards that she has received from the Today Show for teachers that inspire them. How cool is that? I'm honored to call her my friend. Welcome, Shannon.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for that nice introduction.
Of course. One of the reasons that I thought you were the perfect person to start this whole thing out with is because this whole channel is about inspiring writers, right? Inspiring people to get put themselves out there and to write their books, to get them published, and then to market them. And I am just amazed at all that you have done to put yourself out there. It seems like every time I look, you're on bouncing back and forth across the country. So tell us a little bit about school visits, other kinds of speaking engagements. What are you doing?
So yeah, all of the above. I love doing the school visits where I go to mostly elementary schools and intermediate schools and just talk to kids and hopefully get them excited about writing, about reading, and to if that happens to be something that they're interested in aspiring toward for a career, that maybe it would plant some seeds there as well, because that actually was one of the seeds that was planted for me was an author visit. So it was Jamie Gilson who wrote Can't Catch Me, I'm the Gingerbread Man. And she visited my school when I was in fifth grade. It was the first author visit I had ever been a part of. And she had a school-wide writing contest leading up to her visit, and we could all submit a story. And during the assembly, she called me up, and I had won the contest. And so I got to shake her hand to get a copy of her book. And I just remember, as someone who loved writing, I mean, I was always writing in diaries, writing poems, writing stories. As someone who always loved writing, to just get and sit and be able to listen to someone who does that for a living was really cool, because there are often visits to the school from the firefighters and people in the community, but you don't often know about what it's like to be a writer. And sometimes it seemed like a stretch, like, well, I couldn't become like a published writer. And so to hear someone and get to see that it is possible, that planted some seeds really early on. So I love getting to go to schools and do the same thing. But I also like to do um, events for older kids, like people aspiring to be writers or just to be thinking about careers that we may not think about normally, and things that just our parents do, or people in our if we're from a small town, you're limited in what you might think you could do for your future career. So I do all kinds of dare to dream workshops and things to have kids think about what is that thing that you would love to do, and even if it seems far reaching, like how they could maybe attain that dream and see the steps and the goals that you can set to get there.
That is so awesome. And it's just proof of the power of books and how, as authors, we can extend that beyond just having a book to read, which of course is wonderful. But you also do some adult workshops and trainings, don't you? Tell us about that.
Yes. So some of the Dare to Dream workshops are for adults. I do them at leadership events, women's events, things like that, but also professional development in writing. So for aspiring writers, but also for teachers in how to teach writing in ways that are engaging and get kids excited about writing. And some of that is by providing authentic audiences, but also by having certain techniques and strategies you use within the lessons themselves. So that was why I wrote Writing from Scratch, because I wanted to share some of my favorite writing lessons from when I was in the classroom, because I taught for 26 years. And being able to share the joy of writing that I have for myself, but how teachers can share that with their students to get them wanting to write and to become better writers. So I do a lot of that, but I also do different sessions at conferences and at teacher professional developments on things like growth mindset, where I talk to them about how we best learn and ways that we can inspire our kids to embrace having a growth mindset.
Perfect segue because I wrote a growth mindset book also, and you were a great inspiration in that because this book, Yay, You Failed, is just, it's so funny. The title alone just is perfect because it helps us to realize, right, about failure. And talking to kids, it took me a while to realize I wasn't following my own advice. I wasn't embracing the failure like I should have to learn from it as opposed to getting upset or right or being disappointed. And Y is for yet. Yet is one of my favorite words. So I love that too. Tell us a little bit about growth mindset and the science behind the brain chemistry and all of that that goes along with the growth mindset.
Sure. So I wrote Y is for Yet, gosh, pretty early on. And it was something that I just really felt like as a teacher of elementary school that kids really needed to understand because what it does, growth mindset puts the power back in their hands. So many times I would see students that would see someone else catch on to something a little bit quicker, and then they would think for themselves that maybe they just weren't as smart or that, maybe they were never going to get it or they would just shut down. And so with growth mindset, what we're trying to teach kids is that it isn't about like what you're born with, like your innate ability. It's about the repetitions that you put in, the amount of learning and focused time that you spend trying to figure something out, the mistakes that you make that help you to see the ways that didn't work so that you can get closer to the ways that do work. So all of those kinds of things can help kids to see that, oh, so it's not just that this this person next to me, just naturally gets it and I'm not getting it, so something must be wrong with me. But instead, it's, oh, if I want to get it, I have to put in as much repetitions as that person. And some of the things, we talk about the iceberg effect where you see the success of someone up here, you see their ability to do something, and it seems like they just get it. Or kids look at superstars or Olympic athletes or people that are at the top of their game, and they just assume that they just came out of the womb able to do some of these things. And it took an incredible amount of training. And some of these students in our classroom, they may have been exposed to different experiences or have been working on things or doing things related to the thing that they're catching on to so quickly. And it's not that they're catching on to it so quickly, it's that they've already had prior experience, they've already had practice with it. And so when kids can understand that, oh, it's the amount of practice, the amount of learning that affects what I'm able to do, then it opens up everything. Like anything that you want to learn how to do, you get to do. But it's up to you for that amount of effort that you want to put in. And I just think that kids don't know that. I didn't know that as a kid. Like I also had that mindset of, oh, well, this is something, I'm not a math person, or oh, I can't draw. You hear people say things like that.
Yes.
That's a fixed mindset saying that you are not going to ever have that ability. And it's not true. We need kids to understand that that is simply not true. And so that was why I was so passionate about wanting to write it and having kids understand that they have the power themselves. And like this Penelope Perfect book, it's also understanding that no one expects you to be perfect. And so making mistakes is part of the process. I talk about a success cycle that try something and then we fail, but fail stands for first attempt in learning. And then but we learned something from that failure. We learned what didn't work. And then we tweak or change something so that we can try it again in a different or new way. And that is really important too. You probably heard the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and over and expect different results. Cycle, you can't just go to try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. I give you credit for trying a lot, but if you're not changing something with each of those failures to learn something new, then it's not going to change the outcome. And so helping kids to understand that success cycle and that fail, yes, is part of it, which is why I wrote, Yay, you failed. Like that is proving you are trying something if you failed. Because a lot of times kids are afraid of messing up. And so they won't try in the first place because they don't want to be embarrassed or they don't want to appear like they're not very smart or something. And so it's celebrating that someone tried and that they failed because that gets them closer to achieving their goals. Something I teach about setting goals in my Mindset Power book is the SET method. So there's SMART goals, I'm sure you've heard of, this specific, measurable, all of that. But that's a lot, especially for an elementary kid to set a goal that way. And so I shortened it to SET. So the S part is still specific, like what specifically is the skill you're trying to master? And then the E part is the effort. So this is the part where you are in the driver's seat. So what effort can you put in? So whether it is watching YouTube videos on how this thing is done, like my daughter wanted to learn how to crochet, she wanted to learn how to play ukulele. She started with YouTube videos, watching those, free resource, right? And found places like the library that had people, doing crochet and teaching people how to crochet, those kinds of things. And so finding resources and then that effort part when you're setting your goal, what is it specifically I want to learn? What is the effort I'm going to put in? Like, am I going to find videos that I can watch? Am I going to find something in person, like possibly at a local library? Or maybe if I want to learn piano, I can find a piano teacher. And how often am I going to practice? Because that makes a difference in the effort part too. And then the T is your timeline. Like, can you set yourself a timeline? Like, I'm hoping to be able to play this song by such and such date, or I'm hoping to, it can also be your time with the effort. Like, I'm going to practice at least 15 minutes every day. Like, that's attainable. I could do that. And so then what happens is, as you've done the set and you've set your goal, then it's a matter of tweaking one of those three things if you haven't made your goal yet. So maybe it's tweaking the S part, the specific part. Maybe I wasn't specific enough, so I don't even know if I met my goal. Like to just say I'm going to get better at speaking Spanish, let's say. Well,
Right.
that's not very specific. So how do you know? How can you measure that? You really can't. So maybe you're not being specific enough. Or the E part, like if you're really not getting to your goal, you're not mastering that skill, maybe it's the E part, the effort part. Maybe you need to find other people to learn from. Maybe you need to be practicing more often, putting in more reps. Or maybe it's the T part. Maybe you set yourself this goal and you said you're going to learn it by this week, and that's not really realistic. Maybe you need to give yourself some grace and give yourself more time, and that's okay too. There isn't like a time period. You have to learn something. And so, those are some of the things that I like to incorporate in and to help kids with so that they can start setting meaningful goals and start working toward those to see that they actually can do it if they're putting in those steps.
I love it. That's perfect. I love to talk to kids about, ask them if they've ever seen a baby learn starting to walk or trying to walk and what happens first. And they fall, everybody. And then did they give up or are you all still crawling around? And, this just kind of little silly stories that help them to realize that. But what I really love about everything you just said is that how much that relates to us as authors and how much the failure piece
Yes.
plays in there that most of us don't realize at first. Setting those goals. I probably made a fool of myself when I first joined Kidlit 411 because I posted, I'm going to get an agent and publish a book in 6 months. And, I didn't understand those expectations. And that's part of, what I want to do here is to be able to talk to. So how do you see growth mindset versus fixed mindset fitting into creatives like
Oh,
authors like
it's
us?
huge. It really is huge because, well, if you just even think of like Dr. Seuss was rejected 27 times before his first book came out, or J.K. Rowling a dozen times, which I'm sure those publishers are kicking themselves for telling her no.
Yeah, for sure.
But I have a good story that goes with this that I always share at my author visits, and it's that my I Love Strawberries book, which is The first story I ever wrote, the first story I wrote that.
Wow, I
Yes,
didn't know that.
I wrote that in 2010, back when attended my very first writing conference. And I submitted it as, so some conferences have contests you can submit
Mhm.
to. And so I submitted it as, a children's book entry and it won. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like you, I'm thinking, I've got this figured
That's
out.
right.
It's going to become a book. And I was so excited. And I didn't have a clue. And so I submitted it and submitted it and submitted it, and it was turned down for 10 years.
Wow, I didn't know
Yeah.
that. What a
Yeah.
great
So
story.
other books came out before that one came out. Like my very first book was I'm Not a Pirate, which is about my daughter who had to wear an eye patch for 3 years. And Penelope Perfect came out. Some others came out, but the Strawberry one, for whatever reason, I mean, sometimes it was because it is a longer picture book
Mhm.
by today's standards. Normally, picture books are like 500 words, and that one's over 1,000. And also, the fact that it's very different in format because there are diary entries and there's also narrative text. And some publishers weren't sure what to do with that and what that was going to
Yeah.
look like on the page and would it work. And so those were some of the biggest reasons that I got for it not getting published. But then I sent it to Feeding Minds Press. And see, this is another thing. Like one of the things, yep. So the diary entries on one side, and you can see that there's some text in there too. And then also the pictures of what's going on in her head from the diary entries, but also what's going on in real time. So it was Jacqueline Sinquette, the illustrator, did an amazing job of capturing
Beautiful.
all of that. But so one of the things that in my fails, in my no thank you letters, I call them, one of the things that I was learning was, maybe this just isn't the right publishers that I'm sending it to, that it's because and my other thing that I failed to see was that it wasn't just about my whole slant with this book was that it was a book about a girl with determination. She was determined to grow these strawberries even when her parents said, well, maybe when you're older, it's a lot of responsibility, they cost a lot of money, we don't have a place in the yard to put them. There are all the, parent excuses. And she combats each of those by figuring out, everything's figure outable. She figures out a way around each of those things until she finally gets to grow them. I always say the story was not just a story of determination of the character, but also the author, because for 10 years, I was told, no, it's not going to work.
For sure.
But so one of the things that I learned, one of my lessons was this isn't just a story about determination. It's also a story about growing your own food, about growing strawberries specifically. But Feeding Minds Press was the publisher that took it because it was about growing your own food. And that's what they specialize in. They like to show things about agriculture and the joys and challenges of growing your own food. And so then when I got it with the right publisher, they took off with it. And it ended up being my most successful book of all of the books that I have. It got the Good Housekeeping Best Picture Book of the Year. It got the Farm Bureau National Book of the Year. Ryan Reynolds chose to read it on his TV show Bedtime Stories with Ryan. I mean, it got more awards than any of my books combined, and I've written a lot of books. And so it wasn't that it was like sometimes I would tell myself, oh gosh, well, maybe it's just not good enough, or maybe
Yeah.
it's just not very good at all.
Right.
And but what it was is it wasn't in the right hands yet. It wasn't with the right publisher for the right audience. And so once I figured that out, then it ended up doing really well. But if I had given up in those 10 years, it would have been easy to send it through the paper shredder. It really would have, and it was tempting. But there was something about it that I knew there was something there. And I resonated with this story because Jolie is kind of like me. Like I grew up in, I've always had a strong will to, a strong drive. My mom said I was maybe a little hard-headed sometimes. When I had my mind set on something, there was no turning me away. And so she's a lot like me, and also writing in a diary. I wanted to bring that out because I think that's cool when kids can sort their feelings and reflect on things through diary writing. And I did have my own strawberry patch for 10 years that I tended to and loved. And so I wanted to bring that out and that's a wholesome, cool thing that kids can do and learn about science. And so there are just a lot of things in it that I really wanted to come out into the world. And then when it finally did it, it did well. But I had to keep a growth mindset for sure, because if I had just given up, then it would have never come to be. I would have just like tossed it.
Right.
So
You had to figure out that when the cycle that you were talking about, you had to figure out after the fail, why did you fail? And you finally got there and figured out that piece of it. And we talk about with authors, we talk about fear of rejection and the pain of rejection and the imposter syndrome, which you already talked about when you said maybe it's not good enough, maybe I'm not a good enough writer. All of those things tie so closely into a growth mindset and what we're
yeah.
trying to do here and convincing people to keep going and keep pushing. And
Yeah, and that's one thing that authors do have to, because I do mentoring by the hour, like privately with writers. I work with them like even before they're published for the first time, like helping them to get it ready to be published, but also helping them in their mindset. And having them understand that that fail part is part of the success cycle. It is part of the process. It's a really hard part of the process.
yeah,
It's not fun. No one enjoys the no thank yous. But there are also times that I've had a no thank you in a story. And I'm now thankful when I look at that manuscript and I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually wasn't ready yet. Like it
yeah,
wasn't where it needed to be. And not that we wouldn't have worked on it and revised it to get it better, but I still, cringe at some of the things that I sent out in my earlier days when
me too.
wasn't, I didn't know the things that I know now about good writing. And so, it all works the way it's supposed to, but writers do need to understand. And I think many times, if you're not writing for your profession, if it's more of a hobby or something just on the side, it's really easy to get 5 to 10 rejections on something and think, well, it wasn't meant to be. Like, it's just, I'm not a
Yes,
writer. And that's just not true because you can do so many things. If it is truly the craft of writing that is the issue, there are so many ways that you can get critiques. You can have meetings with, various people. You can go on Readsy. You can, find a critique group, which my critique group I love and value so much. I have two of them. But there are all kinds of ways you can improve the craft of it. Or it could be who you're submitting it to, or, like if you can get an agent, that's really helpful. But sometimes it's as hard to get an agent as it is to get a yes from an editor. So
yeah,
there's that battle too. But most of the books that I've done, I mean, almost all of them were without an agent. So it is definitely possible without
yeah,
an agent. There are ways that you can get indoors that of people that don't accept unagented material by attending conferences or special events, things like that, that you get to specially submit. And so you have to find those ways too. And that's all part of the learning. That's all part of that effort part of figuring out how can I get this in the hands that it needs to be in.
for sure. And your story about I Love Strawberries just makes me think if it had been accepted earlier by a different publisher, it may not have taken off like it did, just
Yeah,
because it was the right publisher, right?
it really was. And then because that did well, they let me write I Love Blueberries.
Right.
And so that's out in the world now. And I love that, kids are going to get to learn about growing different things.
That's awesome. Such great stories. I'm going to have you back because this is just all too much good stuff. Um, do you have a favorite moment as an author?
You
I know
know,
that's a hard question because
it
there's so
is.
many
I have
good
so
ones.
many special moments, but something actually just happened yesterday. I was at an inner city high school and I was asked to come and talk to these kids about my career and how I got here. And so I was talking to them, and then afterward, I was in a room with the guy who had invited me to come, and he, as we were talking, he noticed someone was at the door, and it was a teacher that was also in the room that I had just spoken in. And she asked if she could bring down a student that she had in mind that wasn't in that classroom at the time, but that she knew was very interested in becoming a children's book author. And so she brought her in,
Oh,
and this little girl, well, little girl, she's high school, but she she started crying and said, when I asked her, why do you want to be a children's book author? And she started crying and she said, so she was Hispanic. And she said that when she was in fifth grade, she read her first ever book that featured a Hispanic little girl that was like her, and that she wanted to write stories that would reflect that as well. And she just started sobbing.
oh,
I said, "Oh my gosh, honey." I was like, "You have the why, like the reason, a great reason for writing books that are going to be special to their readers." And so, anyway, that was a pretty special moment, and that just happened yesterday.
she will do it too, just
I
because of that
will.
experience with you. I mean, that is wonderful. All right, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up, but I want to have you back. Any last thoughts or something that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure everybody knows?
Well, since your audience is children's book writers, I guess I would just say to just remember that this is not a quick and easy like profession. Like you've got these great stories, I'm sure you do. But it really, writing the story is just a part of it. And so don't give up when you get those no thank yous, because trust me, I could wallpaper this whole room with no thank yous that I have gotten. And it really is a matter of just continue learning, continue seeking out people who have done it, because success leaves clues. And so if you can find someone that is a little further on the journey than you are, that's who you need to be talking to. And I feel like we learn more even from someone that's just a little further ahead than us
Yeah,
than we do someone like a J.K. Rowling. I mean, we can
for
definitely
sure.
learn from her as well, but sometimes it's nicer to learn from someone who's just a little further down the path, because everything is fresher in their mind and they're still learning a lot too. So finding people, finding conferences and workshops and podcasts and things like this where you can watch videos and just learn for free about this thing that you're excited to do. And if it's something that is in you that you're really excited about doing, then please don't give up on it, because you really can do it. Anyone can. It's just a matter of, remember, putting in those reps and getting the amount of learning that you need to be able to get there, because you will. I really believe that anyone who wants to do it can do it. It's just the timeline is different for everyone, and it's all in what you can learn.
Awesome. Just perfect. Thank you. I knew you were the perfect guest to open this whole series up, and I really appreciate it, and I want to have you back sometime soon. Good luck with all you're doing.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks for doing this, because
Thanks.
I really feel like the Kidlit community is such a giving community. Like we
Yeah.
all have these common goals to get
Yes,
kids excited about reading and to provide meaningful stories that they can enjoy or learn something from. And so we all have this common goal and we all want to help each other. And so I just think
for
it's just
sure.
a very special community.
It is for sure. And I promised myself when I first started that I would give back if I got to the point where I could do that. So that's
Yeah,
what it's all about.
that's
Thanks,
right.
Shannon. Have a great day.
Welcome. All right,
Bye.
you too. Bye-bye.